used to be pretty woke. I had the TDS, the Trump derangement syndrome. I thought everybody who voted for Donald Trump was a racist. All that changed when I encountered a Yale study in 2018. The study found that there was a difference between how white liberals and white conservatives talk when they talk to black people. And when I saw the headline, I was jubilant. We got 'em. That's what I thought. Turns out the opposite was true. The study found that when white liberals talk to black people, they do something called presenting lower competence. They dumb down their vocabulary using fewer syllables than they do when they talk to white people. And white conservatives don't do this. I remember seeing the study and thinking with horror, and we liberals call conservatives racist? What could be more racist than the patronizing view that black people need to be protected from our big vocabularies? Yet it was this patronizing view that minorities are oppressed and in need of saving that I could suddenly see was at play in much of the progressive worldview. It caused me to think, well, if I'm wrong about conservatives being racist, what else might I be wrong about? A lot, it turns out, including my next guest. I spoke to Dana Loesch this week, the former doyen of the National Rifle Association. As my woke liberal self, Dana was enemy number one. Now she's one of the most moral voices protecting the right from embracing its far fringe. Here is some of our conversation. Dana Loesch, thank you so much for joining me. It's so great to be here with you.
Batya, thank you so much for having me. And I'm so happy that you came around, and it just warms my heart. I love that.
So we're going to talk a lot about that, but I did want to start with something that you've been making waves about recently. So it all sort of started when Tucker Carlson had Nick Fuentes, a notable white nationalist and Holocaust denier, on his show a couple weeks ago. And then the head of Heritage, Kevin Roberts, supported Carlson platforming Fuentes in what was a very cozy interview. You were one of many people who called Roberts out, but you took it one step further. You had him on his show. And Dana, you did what I think is maybe one of the best interviews, just from a journalistic point of view, that I've ever seen in my life. The way that you just calmly broke down the flaws in his thinking. It was remarkable. We have a little clip of that. Let's take a look at that.
You said that you wouldn't have Nick on if you had a show. You wouldn't have had him on your program. Why?
There's very little common ground. If
we're supposed to have these ideas out in the public square and examine them, why wouldn't you have him on your program?
Well, I would rather talk about the ideas in a forum at Heritage or some other events.
Is it venomous to say that you hate Christian Zionists?
Oh, of course it is.
Because Tucker said those things. So that would be, I mean, is that not sowing division?
It's certainly not helpful, but it doesn't mean that he ought to be canceled, because if in fact,
well, that's not the question. It's not whether he should be canceled. Is that sowing division to say things like that?
Oh, it's certainly.
What was going through your mind when you were conducting that interview?
Well, I will give some credit to Kevin Roberts for agreeing to do it, because he had to have known that, you know, I'm always going to be a nice hostess. I'm not going to go and ambush somebody on my show, but I'm going to ask the difficult questions. And I was trying to reconcile how he was saying the things that he was saying with the positions that he actually held. For instance, you know, in that clip, he's talking about, well, we have to discuss these ideas, but yet he actually didn't want to discuss those ideas. And his whole objection was resting on this presupposition that these were ideas that were even, A, worthy of being embraced momentarily for consideration and debate, and B, that these were ideas that weren't already defeated in May of 1945. And that's what really was astounding to me, because not every idea, especially one that has been prosecuted and defeated worldwide, there's nothing new. It's the same stuff. It's just being regurgitated behind this veneer of nationalism. So why are we pretending otherwise? And it just seemed to me that it was a weak ploy to try to get a slice of that digital economy by, flirting around with these ideas, which then legitimizes them to mainstream audiences. And that was the real objection. And so trying to make him understand that this is how we're viewing this. You're holding this position that we should be discussing these ideas and having these debates, simultaneously denying that same thing on your platform for the most obvious reason. So I walked away with it thinking, well, he really agreed with me on this. Actually, he doesn't agree. He agrees with me. He doesn't agree with himself. But I don't think that he ever recognized that.
I totally agree with you. I don't think that this is a fight about values. I think it's a media turf war for people on the right, that it's really conservatives versus content creators. It's not like right on right, violence or what have you. Who's winning?
I think they've blinked. I think they have blinked. I mean, when you have to move the goalpost as many times as I've seen people do over the past couple of weeks, that's not a move that's, characteristic of strength or of winning the argument, when you constantly have to reframe what you're saying and reshape your answers. I think that the way that you described it is, I think that's the perfect encapsulation. You have a bunch of people who are worried about audience capture. They're terrified that they are going to be moved out of that digital economy, which incentivizes controversy and rewards controversy within the algorithm. That rewards it with clicks, that rewards it with money, it rewards it with influence. And so instead of being thoughtful, people are encouraged to be more conspiracy minded. It's like idiocracy in action. That's what we're seeing. And I had a really interesting conversation a couple of months ago with my friend Brent Bozell, who was over at Media Research Center. And he made a great point in that a lot of what we're seeing with this content that's, being, pushed online is that there's not an intellectual mooring. And that's the difference between a lot of what we're seeing now and what we've seen with open and free discussion previously, like in 2010 and even before then. There's always been this intellectual mooring. There's always been this smart place that everybody can kind of, rope off on. And, you can have these debates, and that's absent in a lot of this. I mean, it's just brain slop. I mean, are we seriously going to sit here and talk about chemtrails, for crying out loud? Are we going to seriously entertain the idea that Stalin is worthy of admiration? I mean, these are barbaric ideas that were promoted. The idea of that somehow Hitler, like you can be Team Hitler. These are barbarian ideas that have been defeated in the court of public opinion over and over again, and there's no reason to go and dig them out of the grave now and repurpose them for the purpose of dividing the right. And that, Batya, that's what all of this is about. It's twofold, actually, maybe even three. You have the fight over the digital economy. You have the power jockeying already underway to try to get something in place after Trump's influence wanes when he terms out. And then, of course, you have this division between the United States and one of our greatest allies, and also dividing the right so that you can further destabilize culture in the United States. And there are a lot of people who are too busy navel gazing to pay attention to that psyop, and they're getting hooked, line, and sinkered by it.
How do you personally protect yourself from audience capture? I mean, you're also a content creator.
I think when I got started in broadcasting, I started on October 28th, 2008. So it was right when live streaming was exploding and digital was, really taking off. Social media was taking off. We had the Tea Party. And so there wasn't that incentive to be conspiracist. There wasn't really any reward for that. I mean, people were thought of as like kind of hokey if they traded in that. And then it started changing as social media changed and the algorithms changed. And I think it helped to have my audience built up over, the span of like 10, prior to that, all of that, 10 years. And they knew what to expect. They knew that there was a consistency. I mean, I have been on air every single day for 3 hours a day, not starting in 2008. That was 1 hour on a Sunday. Then I went to every day. But I have such an insane body of work that's out there. And it would be really easy to go through all of it and pick apart any inconsistencies. But I think remaining consistent, because again, it comes back to, where are you moored? What ideas do you really believe in? Because your ideas are not anachronistic. You either believe in something or you don't. Time does not reshape the principle. And I think it's really important to adhere to that. And I think that, and having gotten started before the clickbait incentivization, really was helpful. And I'm not a joiner, so I think all of that kind of contributes.
So it's so amazing for me to be talking to you because I can still remember what it felt like to see your visage and think she's the most dangerous woman in America. And of course, now I look at you and I hear what you're saying. I admire you so much for these principle stands that you're taking. I guess my question is, what was it like representing the Second Amendment for so long? And being seen by a bunch of doofuses on the left as like the face of everything that's wrong with this country. How did you deal with that personally? And how do we get past that kind of polarization?
That's a great question. And I think, with the Second Amendment, too, everybody who believes in self defense really is like the face of it. And it's a lot easier when you're on, and this is the tactic of the left. We always talked about the spider and the starfish in terms of grassroots activism. It's easy to kind of take the head off the spider and then, the body dies. But with the starfish, that really is not doesn't operate that way. And so the left really did not like me, but it didn't matter because there were millions of other people who thought exactly like I did, and trying to discredit me isn't going to do anything against the movement, because that still was consistent, remained the same. But I'm very passionate about it. I always have been, always will be. I've had I've talked about it in my books and on air. When your life is shaped by some unfortunate circumstances in which you are very, very grateful that you have certain instruments that you can use to protect yourself, it makes the testimony even more personal and really kind of vulnerable. And just being very transparent about that, I think has helped a lot. But I got to give you credit as well, because it is not easy, and I think that you deserve a lot of praise for this, Batya. It is not easy being in a hyper political world where common ground is looked at as though it's a betrayal, and being open-minded enough and in such pursuit of truth and integrity that you actually have the courage to say, you know what, I'm changing my mind on this, and this is why. And then you explain it. And I think it takes so much courage and integrity and transparency to do what you did. And so I think that that's even more impressive to me.
That's very kind. I was going to ask you, is there anything that you have changed your mind over in a big way? Or are you one of those people who's lucky enough to have been right about everything starting at age 18?
No, I wish I would have been right at everything starting at age 18. My husband was born basically like Family Ties Alex P. Keaton. He came out a heart of the womb, a hardcore Republican, and he's always been super constant. I was raised in a family, a very far left family, of all Union Democrats. And I did not even meet a Republican until I went to college, hands to sky. I did not meet a Republican until
Wow.
college. And so that was, I was really eye-opening. And I realized, well, I'm not actually against the Second Amendment. And I'm not, I'm actually for lower taxation. And I don't want to get involved in, all, wars and all of this stuff. I want to be able to have like better health care, et cetera, et cetera. And I realized, the more educated I became, I was only political in the sense that my family was political and I followed what they did because it was like inherited. And so I did come around and I did change my mind on that. When I had my kids, I really changed my mind on a lot of other things culturally as well, as it pertains to like third and fourth wave feminism and, this dogged pursuit of men that we had for the past 20 years, which has now led to this very unfortunate circumstance of disaffected young men now. So there were things that I modified. And I think it's great when people do that because that's what it's all about. If we're not growing and if we're not getting better every single year, and if people's ideas, iron sharpens iron, then I think we kind of have to ask ourselves, what are we in this for? If it's not in the pursuit of truth, and is it about self-glorification if we can't even admit when we're wrong, or even if our ideas are replaced by better ideas? This is what it's all about. And so I think it's really healthy to be able to do that. And people shouldn't look down on it.
So I tend to think that a lot of the polarization is overstated. You take an issue like abortion, for example, there's actually a lot more consensus there. The vast majority of Americans think abortion should be legal for, 6 to 12 weeks and then pretty much not at all after that. Similarly on guns, most Americans are very supportive of the Second Amendment, but support for something like red flag laws are 75% of Americans support that. I guess my question to you is, what's the conservative position or the right position for the GOP? Should it be in that place where those consensuses are, where most Americans are at, or should there be a more principled position, even if it doesn't reflect where the people are at?
This is the difference between the party and the coalition. I think the party absolutely should have a principled position because you should have things around which everyone can gather. You should have those markers like, yes, this is what we believe in and this is what we're about. This is what we fight for. And it goes back to Reagan's 80-20 rule. The coalition can be 80-20. There could be 80% of things that they agree on and 20% of things that they don't. And when they accomplish that 80%, then they can go out there, Katie bar the door, and they can brawl over the other 20%. But I think it's important for the party to have those principles and to have those things that, because that's one of the things that's not anachronistic. Time does not change it. Time does not change whether or not you are okay with more or less government. And so that's where I think I really think the RNC needs to do a better job at differentiating that in terms of talking party and coalition, because it confuses. I mean, we haven't had a coalition on the right, not since maybe kind of the 90s under Newt Gingrich, but then that was still a mostly Republican coalition. This has been the first time, and it's even bigger than the Tea Party was, where everybody truly 80-20 came together. And so these fights over some of these other issues and disagreements are to be expected, but that's where the true diplomacy and statescraft comes in. How do you manage that coalition, keep everybody on track for the 80, but still preserve those principled stances on those 20% issues? And I think that that's the way to succeed going forward.
And who do you think in the party is most likely to be able to do that right now?
Goodness, I don't know. I have some of my favorites. You know, I don't want to show too many of my cards before 28. I kind of want to see where everything kind of pans out. But I do think we have no shortage of good candidates. We have some really good people on the right. I look at the left and I'm like, why haven't you all why didn't they get up and nurture their young guns? It was like when Barack Obama left the White House, he took all the air out of the room with him. And now you got Jack Schlossberg, who just came up with one of the most unfortunate slogans of a campaign I've ever seen in my life. I don't even know if I feel like dirty saying it on air. You got that, and then you've got Mandani, and then you have Gavin Newsom, who I don't know. I mean, that's who it is. And I'm just like, I feel really good about where we are. We've got a lot of really good choices.